Rancher lived alone for years, until the Bigfoot returned, his brother's hat. The hat in the storm. Before we begin, take a moment to comment your city. Where are you watching from today? And once the story is over, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. A winter night fell upon the Wild West, the wind howling fiercely as it swept across the pale, withered plains. Somewhere in the distance, the faint wail of a harmonica drifted through the storm, weaving into the pounding rhythm of hooves striking the hardened earth. Red dust curled into the air along the narrow trail that led toward a lonely ranch. Inside the old wooden house, Maverick the horse stomped restlessly against the floorboards, his eyes fixed on the door. Jonah Hale, the rancher who had lived in solitude for years, stepped forward slowly. When he pulled the door open, the storm lashed icy wind into his face, and there on the snow-streaked dirt before the porch lay still and silent. A hat. Not just any hat. The battered, weather-worn hat of his brother Silas. Its brim was torn, its crown stained with the dark crust of dried blood. In that moment, it cut through Jonah's chest like a blade. Memories long buried clawed their way back, the scream in the woods, the night of loss, and the looming darkness of the tall shadow. Jonah had tried so hard to forget. The man and the shadow of the prairie. The Montana plains stretched wide like a sea of brittle grass, where the wind whispered harshly across faded hills. In the middle of that vast emptiness stood a weathered ranch house, its wooden roof bleached gray, its fences leaning and broken, and no chimney smoke rising for years. Only the groan of rusty hinges in the wind, and the stamped tracks of horses hardened into the dirt. The townsfolk nearby called it the House of the Loner. They seldom saw him except for rare moments when he rode into town for salt bullets or a cheap bottle of whiskey. Jonah Hale, 50 years old, had once been a hardened rancher, a gunslinger who never flinched. But ever since the day his brother Silas vanished into the northern woods, Jonah had lived like a shadow, silent, withdrawn, trusting no one but his old horse Maverick. At night, he often sat on the porch staring toward the dark line of the forest where the legend of the tall shadow still haunted the land. In the pale moonlight, the prairie wind mingled with his heavy sighs, as if to remind him that grief never truly fades. That solitude, cold thick like ashes, clung to Jonah for years. A man once familiar with bullets and the razor edge of life and death was now drowned by memory itself, living each day as though half his soul had already been buried. If it were you alone on a windswept ranch with nothing but an old horse for company and a past that never sleeps, what would you do? Part 1. The Returning Hat. The sky tore across like a ripped hide wind screaming through the parched prairie. Hailstones pelted the weathered wooden roof of Jonah Hale's ranch. Inside, Maverick pawed nervously at the floor, the scent of damp straw mingling with his hot breath. Jonah donned his worn leather coat and stepped onto the porch, his revolver resting loosely at his hip. The Wild West nights were already bitter, but the storm drove the cold even deeper into his bones. Jonah was used to silence, but the way Maverick trembled sent a chill up his spine. The horse had never been afraid for no reason. A lightning bolt cut across the sky, and in that flash he saw it, a faded cowboy hat lying abandoned on the steps, soaked through with rain, caked with mud, streaked with dark brown. What had once been blood. Jonah froze, his calloused hand trembling. That hat. He recognized it immediately. Silas, his brother, blood and kin, a companion across every dusty trail. The brother who had vanished on that fateful night in the northern forest, leaving Jonah alone to face a lifetime of battles. The storm outside roared, but inside Jonah, another storm raged, the storm of memory. He picked up the hat, raindrops dripping through its tattered brim. Running his fingers over the frayed stitching, Jonah could almost hear Silas's laughter from long cattle drives across the plains. The two brothers had shouted, urged the herd, the whip-cracking hooves pounding, shaking the prairie itself. Then the memory shifted to that tragic afternoon. Gunfire echoed through the pine forest, deer scattering in terror. Jonah remembered it vividly. When he turned back, all he could hear was Silas's scream in the mist. Jonah, run, he had run. But when he looked back, only blood-soaked earth remained, and giant footprints pressed deep into the mud. People said the tall shadow had taken Silas. Jonah had never fully believed it, but he had never found a body either. His hand tightened on the hat, his chest constricting. Tonight it had returned as if proof buried long ago had been unearthed. Who or what had brought it back? Jonah turned to the blackened field. The wind howled like 1,000 ghostly voices, whipping red dust and grit across his face. Far off amid the storm, he felt eyes watching him from the forest, from the mist-covered hills. Maverick whinnied sharply, stamping the ground. The horse seemed to warn him something was out there beyond the tree line in the screaming wind. Jonah's eyes narrowed, fingers brushing the grip of his revolver. For a fleeting moment he thought he saw a towering figure in the rain, larger than any man. But when lightning flashed again, the space was empty. He ground his teeth, clutching the hat in his hands. If you're still out there, show yourself. But only the wind answered, and the rapid beating of his own heart. Jonah stepped back into the house, tossing another log into the fireplace. The flames cast long, flickering shadows across the wooden walls. He placed Silas's hat on the table, staring at the dried blood, dark stains like cuts in the grain. In the firelight, Silas's image returned, sun-browned face, cocky grin, eyes sparkling as he said, "Jonah, whatever happens, don't live in fear." Jonah clenched his eyes shut, breath heavy. All these years, he had lived like a shadow, avoiding the town, letting people call him mad. But that hat, it was a reminder that the truth still lingered, somewhere never spoken. A gunshot rang in the distance, echoing through the storm. Not from his ranch. Another hunter in the night. Or a signal. Jonah looked toward the window where the black forest swallowed the horizon. He took the hat, stepped onto the porch again. The storm had softened slightly, but thick fog rolled in from the woods. He placed the hat on his head, testing the fit. It still fit perfectly, just as it had on Silas. He stood still for a long moment, ears straining for the night's smallest movements. Maverick's snorted eyes fixed on the forest. Inside, Jonah, a strange determination welled up. He could no longer ignore the truth. A question rang out, haunting like the wind through the shingles. Who or what returned this hat? If it were you in a snowstorm and a blood-stained hat belonging to a long-lost loved one appeared on your porch, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Part 2. Footprints in the Snow. A crescent moon hung suspended in the sky, its silver light scattering across the snow-covered prairie. A gentle wind stirred, making the tiny snowflakes shimmer like crystal. Jonah Hale stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the vast white expanse. Silas's hat still rested in his hands, but what truly drew his attention were the massive footprints deep in the snow, not made by an ordinary man. Maverick inhaled sharply, ears pricked, and jumped back toward Jonah. Even the storm-seasoned horse shivered now. Jonah crouched to study the prints. They led straight into the distant pine forest where darkness swallowed everything. Jonah's heart pounded. Years of solitary living had never stirred fear like this. Could Silas have returned? Or were these tracks the sign of something beyond imagination? With his revolver loosely at his hip, Jonah stepped off the porch into the snowy light. Each footstep on the powdery snow crunched like the beat of his own heart, echoing into the silent night. Ahead, the pine trees rose like black pillars under the moon. The wind whipped stronger, scattering snowflakes like smoke, blurring everything into ghostly shapes. Jonah edged closer, eyes fixed on the enormous footprints leading into the shadows. Maverick followed cautiously, every step tense. Jonah drew his gun finger on the trigger ears, straining for any sound, the snap of a branch, a predator moving, or something else entirely. Suddenly, a scream pierced the forest, neither fully human nor entirely animal. Jonah's hair stood on end. He glanced at the crescent moon for guidance, but all he saw was the dim, icy glow on the thick snow. With each step, Jonah's mind swirled with painful memories of Silas, haunted by the night his brother disappeared. Yet this time the tracks were clear, like an invitation or challenge from a colossal being beyond belief. He pressed forward, snow thick up to his calves, each step cracking sharply underfoot. The footprints led to a clearing among the ancient pines. And then, under the faint moonlight, he saw it. A towering creature, its body covered in gray-black fur, standing motionless in the snow. The creature turned its face, eyes glowing with intelligence and curiosity. Jonah was speechless, memories of Silas flooding back. Could this be the truth about that fateful night? He trembled, yet tried to stay composed. The creature bent down and placed something on the snow, a second-old hat, dusted with snow and dirt, as if sending a message. Jonah realized that the impossible was now real. The tracks, the presence, and the answer. Maverick neighed loudly, and Jonah stepped back, gun raised. But in the creature's gaze he saw no hostility, only a strange connection, almost like a reminder from Silas himself. Jonah knelt, picking up the hat, the snow's chill seeping into his hands. His mind spun all these years of pain, of isolation. Now it seemed there was an answer of its own. The creature stood silently, eyes still on him, then slowly retreated into the forest, vanishing like a dream. Jonah looked up at the sky, the crescent moon dimming behind the clouds. He exhaled, shoulders tense. Inside him, fear and hope mingled. The wild night, the howling wind, the crunching snow beneath Maverick's hooves, all reminded Jonah this wild west still held mysteries, but also miracles. A question echoed in his mind. If a creature beyond human imagination brought back traces of a lost loved one, would you have the courage to follow those tracks into the dark? What would you do if you found giant footprints leading into the dark woods at night? Would you follow them or stay safe on the ranch? Comment your choice below. Part 3. Blood Memories. Jonah Hale stood in the middle of the pine forest, clutching Silas's hat. The night wind howled, swirling snow like silver snakes under the moonlight. Maverick breathed heavily, ears erect, jumping back toward his master. Suddenly, old memories flashed like lightning through the darkness. Jonah recalled the night Silas, his beloved brother, disappeared into the woods. Screams echoed through the shadows, mingling with the whistling wind and the chaotic pounding of horse hooves. Blood stained the ground, dark red pressed into the unbroken snow. He inhaled sharply, closing his eyes, feeling a pang of guilt rip through his heart. Why couldn't he save Silas? Why had he left him alone in that terrifying sandstorm? Every detail came alive. Gunshots, ringing herds, stampeding the horrified gaze of travelers caught in the chaos. Jonah opened his eyes, moving slowly along the giant footprints. In the dim moonlight, he visualized that night Silas fleeing through the sandstorm, clothes soaked in blood, eyes wide with fear, but still burning with determination to survive. Silas's voice rang in Jonah's mind, clear and haunting. "Jonah, help me." The wind carried the cry, echoing endlessly through the pine forest. Strangers appeared, eyes suspicious and threatening, sending bullets slicing through the still night. Jonah closed his eyes again, hand trembling as it brushed the brim of Silas's hat. Guilt surged like blood still warm on the cold snow. He silently vowed if he had the chance, he would never leave his brother alone again. Reliving the memory, Jonah felt himself there, sandstorms rolling across the vast prairie, red dust covering the horse's legs, scattering the herd in panic. Silas had to dodge, weaving through, avoiding stray bullets from unknown assailants. Gunshots rang like taunts, each bullet cutting through the wind, amplifying the terror. In that moment, Jonah sensed Silas's utter solitude, no companion, no help, only survival and sheer will. He closed his eyes, imagining Silas's hand brushing a tree, searching for shelter. Blood spattered red streaks bleeding across the white snow, reflecting the moonlight like a reminder of past tragedy. His heart tightened, remembering his brother's eyes, fearful, pleading. He remembered Silas injured sliding down a snow-covered hill. Blood mixed with sand, erasing each footprint. Jonah seemed to hear Silas's ragged breaths, his desperate pleas carried by the wind. The recollection chilled him. If I had been there, could I have saved him? Or would I only have prolonged the pain? Staring into the silver moon, Jonah felt the haunting. Clearly, memories are not just the past, they are reminders, never to miss another chance. Every streak of blood on the snow, every echoing scream, every suspicious gaze of strangers. All appeared vividly before Jonah, wrenching his heart. Maverick snorted sharply, almost sensing his master's pain. Jonah knelt, placing Silas's hat in his hands. The blood of memory still glowed crimson, but now it was a mark reminding him the living must move forward, the lost remain alive in the heart. He drew a deep breath, listening to the wind's whistle, the crunch of snow beneath his boots, and as if a whisper from the shadows of the forest, "Jonah, don't forget me." His heart surged with guilt, but also with resolve. He must continue the search, face the truth, honor his promise to Silas. Jonah rose, eyes fixed on the deep forest where the giant tracks had led him. He knew these bloody memories would never fade, yet they forged his strength. The vast sky stretched above, silver moonlight spilling across the pine forest, reminding him the Wild West is dangerous, but it is also full of miracles and chances to redeem the past. Have you ever been haunted by memories that you couldn't escape no matter how far you ran? How would you face the ghosts of your past if they led you into the dark woods? Comment your thoughts below. Part 4. The Whispering Town. Jonah Hale stepped into the small town after days of silently roaming the snow-covered highlands. The Silver Spur saloon glimmered with oil lamps, but inside the smoke of tobacco and the stale scent of liquor hung thick, the air tense. Suspicious eyes followed him. From a corner, a few townsfolk whispered among themselves, murmuring the tale they'd heard. Jonah had gone mad, his brother taken by some monster, and now he survived, yet alone. Outside, the faint wail of a harmonica drifted through the streets, emphasizing Jonah's isolation amidst the flow of townspeople. His boots clicked slowly on the wooden floor, each step echoing under the weight of distrustful stares. Every whisper felt like a blade cutting into his heart, a reminder of the unhealed loss. Maverick waited outside, breathing heavily, sensing the thick tension in the air. Inside the saloon, villagers gathered around tables, glancing at Jonah and then back at each other. A tall man raised his drink and sneered, "I hear he's lost his mind talking about his brother being taken by a monster. Who'd believe such nonsense in broad daylight?" Mocking laughter rippled through the room, whispers spreading like wildfire. Curious children peeked through the windows only to be pulled back by their parents. Jonah remained silent, eyes fixed on the foggy old glass of his drink, feeling the suffocating grip of rejection and isolation. Pain surged again, memories of Silas clinging to him. He could not tell anyone the truth, could not convince them that the monster was real. Every rumor, every skeptical glance cut into his bleeding heart. Jonah left the saloon, walking along the dusty red streets. The sound of hooves echoed through the narrow alleys, but no one dared approach. Every eye followed him, full of doubt. A boy huddled against a wall, whispering to his sister Ma, and Pa said, "Don't play with Jonah. He's crazy." Jonah closed his eyes, feeling the isolation wrap around him. The sounds of the town, the wind whistling over rooftops, dogs barking, the creak of the windmill combined as if trying to drown him in solitude. Yet deep inside, a small flame flickered. He knew that to save Silas, he could not yield to rumors. This very isolation paradoxically would forge him stronger. The next day, Jonah entered the general store. The shopkeeper stared him down, glancing toward the onlookers as if to warn, "Don't listen to him. The madman stands before you." Skeptical eyes from the townsfolk made Jonah's chest tighten. Looking out the window, he saw the wild plains stretching endlessly, a sandstorm rising in the distance, a stark reminder of the harsh independence of the Wild West. Every glance felt like a test. Could Jonah survive amid suspicion and gossip? He felt the isolation, but also the weight of responsibility. Silas was out there somewhere in the forest, and he was the only one who could save him. The distant echo of gunfire reminded him the West does not forgive weakness. Jonah stood in the town square, staring at the dust-covered wooden houses, villagers peeking from windows. Rejection rumors, skeptical eyes, all formed an invisible wall before him. But Maverick sniffed, lifted his head to Jonah as if reminding him, "You still have a duty. The truth is waiting." Jonah gripped the reins tightly, a resolve unlike any before surging within him. Every step across the red dust was a vow to the past. He would find Silas, confront the pain, and prove that truth is always stronger than rumor. Have you ever felt judged or misunderstood by everyone around you? If you were Jonah, would you give up or fight to prove the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. Part 5. The Warning Horse. A pale moon hung over Jonah Hale's ranch. The wind howled across snow-covered fields, remnants of yesterday's sandstorm lifting fine red dust into the air. The rustle of grass mingled with the hooves of restless livestock, forming a chaotic yet vivid symphony of the Wild West. Jonah stepped into the stable holding an old oil lantern, its light flickering against the damp wooden roof. Maverick, the loyal old horse, stood quietly in a corner, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. Normally calm tonight, he nudged toward the door, squinting, trembling. A sharp neigh shattered the rare stillness. Jonah froze, heart pounding, a premonition rising within him. He bent down, stroking Maverick's neck. "What is it, old friend?" But the horse would not calm. Snorting, nostrils flaring, he fixed his gaze on the brush outside the stable. A strange tension filled the air. Jonah knew something unusual was about to unfold tonight. He lit the lantern, watching its glow dance across the rough wood. Outside, the wind whipped violently, kicking up lingering red dust from the storm. Hoofbeats echoed, not Maverick's, but heavy, deliberate, each thud making Jonah's chest tighten. He stepped outside, hand gripping the reins, eyes scanning the snowy plains. Suddenly, under the silver moon, enormous footprints were pressed deep into the snow, leading into the forest. Their size stunned him, neither human nor any animal he had ever seen. Maverick squinted, neighed sharply, stepping back. The horse's trembling was a warning. This was no joke. This was reality, raw and wild. Jonah drew a deep breath, forcing calm into his racing heart. Every gust of wind, every stomp of livestock, every shadow stretching from the stable reminded him he was facing a danger unlike any before. Maverick snorted again, tossing his head toward the forest. His shrill neigh sent a chill down Jonah's spine. Jonah bent close, whispering, "If this is real, we need to be ready, Maverick." In that moment, memories of Silas surged forth, reminding Jonah of the pain, the loss, and the reason he could not falter. Fear rose, but so did determination, the uneasy premonition fueling his courage. Jonah threw on his leather coat, secured his old Colt at his side, and stepped out into the night. Maverick followed, cautious eyes bright yet wary. Wind tore across the plains, red dust swirling, while the distant harmonica from the town added a cold, dramatic backdrop. He followed the enormous tracks into the forest, each step heavy on frozen snow. Moonlight revealed the strange impressions, claws, footprints far larger than any known creature. The premonition grew stronger with every heartbeat, raising the hairs on Jonah's arms. His mind was tense yet alert. Facing this giant was not just about survival. It was a test of courage of the past and of unresolved memories. Jonah paused, eyes sweeping the dark woods. Moonlight cast long, ominous shadows through the trees. Maverick neighed again, hesitant to step closer. Jonah listened, the wind, the snap of branches, a strange rustle beyond the thicket. His heart raced. Premonition became a pulse of life itself. Tonight he realized he would have to decide: step forward and face the unknown, or retreat to safety and lose Silas forever. He drew a deep breath, gripping the reins tightly, eyes fixed on the colossal tracks leading deeper into the forest. Anxiety, premonition, fear, memories all fused into a single resolve: move forward. Have you ever felt a warning that something dangerous was near? If you were Jonah, would you follow the signs into the unknown, or wait for safety? Comment below. Part 6. The Shadow in the Mist. The old forest lay blanketed in mist, thick clouds curling around towering trees. The wind whistled through dry leaves, producing eerie sounds like the breathing of a colossal creature hiding somewhere unseen. Jonah Hale moved slowly. Colt gripped tightly in his hand, eyes scanning every shadow. Red dust from distant plains still drifted through the fog, creating illusions that made the forest seem endless. Each of Jonah's steps pressed into the damp, decaying leaves, the rustle echoing in the stillness, quickening his heartbeat. Maverick walked beside him, trembling and softly neighing, reminding Jonah he was not alone, but danger lurked just ahead. The tension thickened. This was no mere walk in the woods. This was a confrontation with the unknown. Suddenly, through the dense fog, a massive shadow emerged. Broad shoulders, thick gray-black fur eyes, glowing amber in the haze. Jonah froze, heart-pounding breath catching. He knew instantly this was the creature that had left the strange tracks by the stable. The mist blurred everything around him, yet every movement of the Bigfoot was clear. Slow, deliberate steps, ragged breathing, long arms swaying with overwhelming weight. Maverick neighed frantically, yet did not bolt. Jonah sensed intelligence in its gaze. It was not merely aggressive, it was watching, assessing. In that instant, emotional tension surged, fear mixed with curiosity, suffocating suspense, sharpened Jonah's senses. Every sound became vivid, every detail painfully real. Jonah stepped forward, his lantern flickering through the mist, illuminating his determined face. The Bigfoot stopped, eyes fixed, lips trembling, as if it might growl. Sand from the distant plains drifted through the trees, making the mist shimmer in the pale light. Carefully, Jonah lowered his Colt, not wanting to provoke fear. He realized this was no ordinary enemy, a giant, yes, but intelligent. More importantly, it held the key to understanding Silas's disappearance. Heartbeats thundered, breaths ragged. The seen man alone and a mysterious giant was breathtakingly tense. Every small movement, the tilt of Jonah's head, the slight nod of Bigfoot, carried messages yet to be deciphered. The Bigfoot did not attack. Instead, it stepped back, revealing something behind it. Jonah's eyes widened, heart freezing, a scarf stained with dried blood Silas's. Memories flooded in screams in the forest, pain loss. In some way, this creature had been the final guardian of his brother's evidence. Bigfoot's deep gaze met Jonah's as if saying, "I mean no harm, but I protect what remains." Jonah bent down, trembling, touching the scarf. Pain, guilt, and a surge of hope washed over him simultaneously. He understood this encounter was not just survival, it was a chance to close a chapter of grief, to uncover the truth. The tension peaked, dense mist, flickering moonlight, Bigfoot standing like a living pillar in the forest. Jonah drew a deep breath, suffocated yet alert, fear and hope intertwined. He realized that to solve the mystery of Silas, he had to trust his instincts and sometimes face fear head-on. Maverick stood beside him, trembling but steadfast, a reminder that they were companions, that Jonah was not alone in this wild frontier. Jonah reached out, touching Bigfoot's arm, a brave gesture, yet one filled with profound empathy. The creature exhaled, then turned, leading him deeper into the forest, toward the final traces of Silas. All other sounds, the distant echo of gunfire, sand blowing across the plains, hoofbeats faded, yielding to a mysterious, hopeful silence. If you were Jonah, would you trust this mysterious creature and follow it into the unknown, or retreat to safety? Comment below. What would you do in the middle of the Wild West night? Part 7. The Silent Evidence. The night was still thick with mist, moonlight piercing through the canopy and faint streaks across the wet forest floor. Jonah Hale stepped toward the massive old tree where Bigfoot had halted since appearing. The tree was so colossal that Jonah had to crane his neck to see its crown stretching into the night sky. Bigfoot bent slightly, its thick, powerful hands placing a small piece of cloth stained with dried blood on the ground. Jonah froze, chest tightening. The faint glow from his lantern reflected off the fabric, making the deep red stains startlingly vivid in the white haze. All surrounding sounds, whistling wind, falling leaves, nocturnal insects, seemed to vanish, leaving only the tense, silent moment. Slowly, Jonah bent down, trembling as his hand touched the cloth. Memories surged. Silas' screams echoing through the forest, gunfire ringing in the distance, the helplessness he had felt. Everything was right here before him. Emotions surged, fear, shock, and a flicker of hope intertwined. Maverick stood nearby, fur bristled, letting out weak neighs. Jonah held the cloth in his hands, eyes tracing the stiffened bloodstains. The faint metallic scent of blood lingered, a reminder that this was not merely a keepsake. It was the final piece of evidence of Silas's tragedy. Memories replayed the deep forest gunfire cracking in the night sandstorms, sweeping across distant plains, stampeding livestock as the chase unfolded. Jonah felt each sound, each image, as if they were resurrected in his mind. Every step he took on the wet earth echoed the heartbeat reminder that Silas had been here, and that the tragic end had yet to be resolved. Bigfoot stood still, eyes deep and knowing, as if comprehending Jonah's pain. Its presence was more than mysterious, it was a silent reminder. The truth exists no matter how much you fear or run from it. Jonah exhaled heavily, heart weighed down. This piece of cloth was his only clue to Silas's whereabouts. All the pain and guilt rose anew. Without this evidence, he would never know what had truly happened to his brother. The wind rustled through the branches, carrying the lingering scent of gunpowder from past conflicts. Distant herds scattered across the plains, hoofbeats echoing from the old riverbanks. The Wild West revealed itself in sharp clarity, danger lurking, life, uncertain, loneliness, and tension always present. Jonah felt profound isolation, yet simultaneously a spark of hope. If Bigfoot had brought this cloth, it meant there was still a chance to uncover the truth to close the painful chapter. He clenched the fabric tightly, determination flashing in his eyes like a fire piercing the dark night. The mist-thickened moonlight casting cold silver over the forest floor. Jonah stood motionless, hand gripping the bloody cloth, feeling the space around him contract. Bigfoot remained a step away, massive yet still gazed toward the deep forest as if awaiting a decision from Jonah. He felt absolute silence, only his heartbeat, his breath, and Maverick's faint trembling. Everything seemed frozen in this moment. Pain, fear, and hope entwined. Jonah realized this was more than a hunt for truth. It was a confrontation with himself, the courage to face the past, the trust to believe in the unseen. Emotions surged stronger than ever, shock, awe, but also the strength to move forward. Jonah stood amidst the forest eyes, focused hands clutching the cloth. Maverick let out a weak neigh, reminding him he was not alone. Bigfoot did not leave. It remained a silent pillar waiting. Jonah drew a deep breath, feeling suffocated, yet determined. To uncover the truth and honor his promise to Silas, he had to step forward. One step, one choice would lead him to secrets hidden deep within the forest, things the Wild West had never witnessed. In this moment, emotion ran high. Fear transformed into resolve, guilt into strength, loneliness into companionship. All sounds, the distant echo of gunfire, sandstorms across the plains, the pounding of hooves, seemed to fade, giving way to determination and hope. If you were Jonah and found this silent evidence in the middle of the Wild West night, would you dare to follow the trail into the unknown or retreat to the safety of your ranch? Comment below, what choice would you make? Part 8. The Confrontation. The mist-shrouded forest blanketed everything around. Every branch screeched in the cold wind, dry leaves clashing together, sounding like a warning. Jonah Hale stepped slowly over the damp ground, his hand trembling as he gripped his old Colt. Each step felt like a pounding heartbeat, every pebble underfoot echoing sharply through the still night. Maverick stood behind him, fur bristling, a soft neigh, alerting Jonah to the presence of something extraordinary. And then, through the swirling mist, a massive figure appeared. Bigfoot stood there, towering, covered in dark brown fur, eyes deep and contemplative, yet not aggressive. Jonah stopped, inhaled deeply, chest tightening with the suffocating weight of the moment. He raised his gun hands, shaking, eyes wide with panic, but tinged with determination. Emotional intensity surged, fear and anger mingled with a nagging curiosity, an understanding of something no one in the wilderness had ever dared confront. Moonlight pierced the mist, reflecting off the gun, casting an eerie, mystical glow. Time seemed to freeze, leaving only Jonah and Bigfoot facing each other, silence so tense that each heartbeat could be heard. Jonah stepped forward, gun trembling, aimed straight at Bigfoot. Memories of the blood-stained cloth and Silas flooded him, screams in the forest, gunshots echoing across the plains, sandstorms sweeping the grasslands, panicked cattle scattering everything replayed vividly before his eyes. But Bigfoot did not attack. It stepped back, its deep gaze conveying something beyond fear or aggression. Jonah, startled, heart-pounding hatred tearing at him. Was this the creature that had taken his brother, or a witness, a bearer of the final clue? Tension reached its peak, each drop of mist on Jonah's face, pressing him into loneliness and remorse. He realized that to move forward, he had to choose: would hatred drive him to violence, or would understanding open the path to resolving the past? The faint moonlight reflected off the foggy ground, casting strange shadows, like the spirits of the past observing every step Jonah took. Jonah recalled his early days on the plateau, the solitary ranch gunshots echoing across the plains, cattle fleeing at the sight of strangers, the villagers' skeptical glances when they saw him alone with Maverick. All memories surfaced vividly, intertwined with the present. Maverick neighed its heartbeat, a reminder that time waits for no one. Jonah bent down, clutching the blood-stained cloth in his coat, eyes trembling yet determined. This was the final piece of evidence about Silas, and Jonah knew that ignoring it would leave him trapped in regret forever. Bigfoot stepped back again but did not flee. Jonah felt the silence filled with meaning. This creature was not an enemy, but a doorway to the truth. His inner turmoil, hatred, or understanding violence or dialogue. He inhaled deeply, voice weak, but resolute. I don't know what you are, but I know my brother's life matters. A peak emotional moment, pain, hatred, and hope coexisting, making the audience's hearts race alongside Jonah's. Jonah lowered the gun, halfway, eyes never leaving Bigfoot. The giant creature stood still, their gazes locked in profound silence. No gunshots, no wind, only Jonah's heartbeat, Maverick's breath, and the presence of a mysterious Wild West creature. Jonah slowly stepped forward, holding out the blood-stained cloth. It belongs to my brother," he said, voice catching. Bigfoot lowered its head, then placed a massive hand on the cloth, acknowledging the truth, empathizing with human grief. The turmoil inside Jonah melted away, replaced by a choking sense of connection. For the first time, he felt a bond with a being seemingly impossible to understand. Emotional intensity peaked. Anger transformed into understanding. Hatred became an ally in the search for truth. Far away, sandstorms roared, gunshots echoed across the plains, and cattle stampeded in panic. Yet Jonah and Bigfoot seemed untouched by it all. Only silence, empathy, and hope remained. Jonah bent down, lifted the cloth, eyes brimming with emotion. Bigfoot stepped back, then turned toward the deep forest, inviting Jonah to follow the trail it wanted him to see. Maverick neighed, Jonah's heartbeat gradually returning to normal, yet still brimming with anticipation. He knew he had to continue stepping into uncharted territory, confronting the final secrets of Silas. The struggle between hatred and understanding had transformed into strength, determination, and faith. If he dared to move forward, the past would no longer haunt him, but guide him like a light. The forest mist and moonlight painted a scene of the Wild West, both mystical and tense. Gunshots echoed in the distance, sandstorms roared across the plains, cattle stampeded in panic, all emphasizing that the untamed West remained a place of survival, where heightened emotions and solitude intertwined with resolve. If you were Jonah, standing face to face with a mysterious creature that might hold the key to your brother's fate, would you trust it and follow, or let fear take over and retreat? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 9. Fire and Memories. The flames danced in Jonah's wooden cabin, casting a warm, orange-red glow across his weathered face, creating shifting shadows that flickered across the walls. Smoke drifted through the cracks in the door, mingling with the scent of dry hay, evoking the Wild West, a land where gunshots echoed across the plains, sandstorms swept through the grasslands, and herds of cattle stampeded in panic at the sight of strangers. Jonah sat by the fire, his trembling hands caressing Silas's old hat, tracing each crack and worn stitch. Every flicker of the flame reminded him Silas still existed somewhere, or at least his traces had survived. Tears welled in Jonah's eyes, not just from the painful memories, but from the first sense in years of truly connecting with his brother. Maverick stood nearby, ears perked, eyes following every movement of his master. The horse's soft whinny acted as a bridge between the present and the past, reminding Jonah that the pain he felt wasn't the end. It was also an opportunity for healing. Jonah whispered, his voice choked. Silas, can you hear me? The firelight reflected across the old wooden walls, casting shadows that danced like the spirits of the Wild West, watching Jonah's every moment. He closed his eyes, letting memories flood back. Gunfire, sandstorms, panicked herds, the suspicious glances of villagers, all colliding in a chaotic swirl of emotions that seemed to squeeze the audience's heart along with his. With eyes shut, The smoke and flickering fire carried him back into the deep forest to the place where his brother once screamed in despair. Blood-splattered gunshots echoed across the plains, and the wind howled over the barren fields, whipping fine sand into his eyes. Every scene appeared vividly, as if it had just happened, making Jonah's chest tighten with anguish. He remembered Silas's eyes wide with fear and pleading, while the bandits lurked behind bushes ready for the final shot. Each time Jonah closed his eyes, he could feel every heartbeat of his brother, every frantic step of the stampeding herd, and the echoing gunshots that reminded him that memories never truly fade. But the fire brought a different feeling, not despair, but hope. Jonah held the hat tighter, sensing Silas's presence beside him. He whispered as if trying to convey a message, "You're still alive. We'll find each other." The emotional crescendo surged, pain and hope intertwined, making the audience feel the tension, the heartbeat quickening with every flicker. Jonah rose, pacing around the fire eyes, scanning every corner as if searching for signs of Silas. Maverick inhaled deeply, sensing the shift in his master's mood. The wind lashed against the wooden windows, but Jonah no longer trembled. Years of loneliness began to give way to determination and faith. He recalled the whispers in town about his brother being taken by a creature, but now Jonah sensed that the truth ran deeper than rumor. The blood-stained cloth that Bigfoot had delivered proved one thing: Silas still had a chance, still could survive. In the fire's flickering light, Jonah felt a sense of peace for the first time in years. The emotional tension softened, replaced with warmth. Pain still existed, but no longer weighed him down, replaced instead by the light of hope. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You won't be alone anymore. We'll fix everything." The hat in Jonah's hands wasn't just a keepsake. It was a bridge between past and present. Every stitch, every crack told the story of Silas, of the Wild West, of days spent battling sandstorms, herds of fleeing cattle, and roaming bandits across the plains. Jonah placed the hat on his head, smiling through tears. It felt as if his brother were standing beside him, watching from a distant place. The emotional tension reached its peak. He realized that the past, though soaked in blood and tears, could become a source of strength and healing. Maverick whinnied, his heartbeat seemingly in sync with Jonah's. Gunshots echoed from the distant plains. Sandstorms still howled, but Jonah was no longer afraid. The emotional crescendo shifted, loneliness and anguish faded, replaced by determination and inner strength. He looked around, seeing the small cabin as a safe haven in the Wild West, a place where pain transformed into hope. Jonah sat down, clutching the hat, tears streaming down his face. He whispered Silas's name, his voice choked, yet resolute. "Silas, we'll find each other. I won't leave you behind." The firelight reflected on his weathered face, mirroring the emotional release, pain, hope, and the beginning of healing. Maverick stood beside him, breathing calmly, confirming that Jonah was no longer alone. The wind outside, the distant sounds of sandstorms and panicked herds, felt farther away, giving way to a moment of peace in the Wild West. Jonah knew the journey to find Silas was still long, but for the first time in years, his heart felt partially mended. The flames flickered, orange-red light spreading throughout the wooden cabin, igniting hope in the hearts of the audience. No matter how painful, the past facing it could lead to healing. Jonah placed the hat on the table, gazed into the fire, and smiled softly. If you were Jonah, holding a relic of a loved one lost long ago, would you let grief consume you? Or would you use it to find hope and heal? How would you face your past? Share your thoughts below. Part 10. Silence like a promise. Dawn spread across the wild western highlands, thin mist gliding over each blade of grass, highlighting patches of brown earth still damp from the night's storm. The wind whispered gently through the prairie, carrying a few stray leaves and lingering specks of sand. In the distance, the livestock stood motionless, listening to the heartbeat of the plains' eyes, wary, perhaps observing a human figure or maybe a creature never before seen. Jonah stepped out of the ranch, hand still gripping Silas's hat, eyes fixed on the edge of the forest where Bigfoot had appeared the night before. Everything was silent, so much so that he could hear his own heartbeat and the rustle of grass beneath his boots. No gunshots, no raging sandstorm, only the calm after the storm, the rhythm of nature syncing with the rhythm of a man's breath. The audience will feel the slow pace of the Wild West, a land once filled with gunfire, now wrapped in a miraculous stillness, signaling the closing of an old chapter. Jonah drew a deep breath, feeling the cold mist seep into his sleeves, not as fear this time, but as serenity. Bigfoot emerged faintly from the mist, its massive form imposing yet not threatening. Jonah stood motionless, unwilling to raise his gun, torn between last night's anger and present understanding. The creature stepped back a few paces, its eyes holding something almost like a silent apology. Viewers will sense the atmosphere of the Wild West slowing down last night's sandstorm, still echoing in memory. The livestock gradually moving toward the old pen, the wind whispering through the misty forest. This is a moment of emotional crescendo, the peak, not from violent action, but from a weighty silence, pain, and hope intertwined. Jonah lowered his head slightly, the hat in his hand serving as a bridge between him and the creature, between past and present. No words were spoken, yet both understood this was an unspoken promise. Bigfoot would never forget humanity, and humans would never turn their backs on the creature. The mist gradually lifted, and the dawn's golden light touched the treetops, creating a cinematic scene. Jonah stepped slowly, eyes following Bigfoot as it disappeared into the deep forest. Gunfire from the previous day's hunting practice echoed faintly, reminding viewers of the wild nights of the West. Maverick stood nearby, shaking his head gently, a low whinny resonating the natural rhythm of the prairie syncing with Jonah's heartbeat. The loneliness of years living alone now gave way to a sense of connection with nature, the mysterious creature, and himself. Each step, each breath in the mist, made Jonah deeply feel the vastness, yet the peace of the West. Viewers will see clearly no guns or sandstorms are needed. The Wild West still holds immense emotional power in the silence, in the breath of the grass, in the dawn's light filtering through mist. Jonah realized that the inner turmoil of the past could only be healed in moments like this. Jonah stood at the forest edge, hat still in hand, eyes following where Bigfoot had vanished. The emotional crescendo rose, the pain and loss from Silas, the tension of stormy nights, and his own loneliness now fused into serenity. He whispered, "Thank you for everything." No reply came, yet a sense of understanding filled the space. The Wild West atmosphere emerged vividly, wind sweeping across the plains, livestock moving gently through the mist-dawn light, touching every crack of the ranch. Everything emphasized a single message: silence can also be a promise, the deepest form of connection between man and nature. Jonah knew his journey was far from over, but this moment marked a milestone. Pain no longer ruled, and hope and faith began to sprout. The audience will feel the natural resonance, a gentle sorrow, yet one with a healing strength. The mist finally cleared, and golden sunlight spread across the ranch, completing the western landscape. Last night's sandstorm had receded. The livestock returned to calm, a gentle breeze passing over grass and weathered wooden roofs. Jonah stood in this space, clutching the hat, closing his eyes to feel the silence as a promise. Maverick whinnied, as if confirming that this moment was not only the end of a long night, but also the beginning of a new chapter. Jonah smiled, eyes glowing with serenity. No fear, no torment. The emotional crescendo reached its peak. Loneliness, dissipated, pain healed, and faith returned. Viewers are invited to listen with Jonah to the Wild West, the wind, the morning light, and the silence holding a promise. No words are needed. Everything is exchanged through glances and the heart. If a moment of silence can hold a promise, what unspoken vows have shaped your life? Would you recognize them if they appeared at dawn? Share your reflections below. The flame of memory. Dawn spread a pale golden light across the farmhouse roof, reflecting on the weathered wooden panels faded by time. The air was quiet, with only the wind whispering through the prairie, accentuating small sounds that felt weighty with meaning. Jonah stepped into the small room where a wooden altar stood proudly in the heart of the ranch. His hands trembled, yet his resolve was unwavering as he placed Silas's old hat upon the altar. In that moment, memories surged back. Laughter echoing chases across sandstorms, the gunfire that once rang out across the Wild West. But now those memories were no longer chains. They were a guiding flame, illuminating the dark corners of his soul. Maverick stood nearby, breathing steadily, eyes fixed on Jonah, as if the horse too understood that one chapter had closed, making way for peace and acceptance. The lingering mist finally dissipated, sunlight streaming through every crack in the wood, glinting off the hat, a symbol of brotherhood that could never die. And then from the doorway, an unfamiliar arm appeared, not human, but a familiar presence. Bigfoot, standing silently, eyes deep yet full of respect. Jonah realized that all this time, not only humans, but even nature and creatures thought to be legend had been walking alongside him. A slight nod from Bigfoot, like an affirmation that all loss and pain could be healed if only one dared to face it and open their heart. Jonah took a deep breath, feeling the long-held loneliness dissolve, replaced by harmony with the past, with nature, and with himself. He turned to gaze at the radiant sky, his heart lighter than ever. All pain had become strength, all memories now a guiding light. Just a few steps away, Jonah could leave the ranch, venture into a new west where no one knew his brother or the losses he had endured. But he chose to stay, to remain in this place, to honor his promise to Silas, to himself, and to the Wild West that had taught him lessons of resilience and kinship. In that moment, sunlight sparkled directly in Jonah's eyes, glinting off the hat as if to say that even in silence, brotherhood is eternal. And perhaps this moment would be etched into the mind of anyone witnessing it, that forgiveness, acceptance, and kinship rise above all loss and solitude. Do you believe memories can save a person? Share your thoughts in the comments. And to increase engagement, if you were the rancher, would you have stayed or ridden away into the wild? Let me know in the comments.